So we worked to include that in the epistle and also to include it in the bulletins. One of the things that we want to hear more feedback from you all on is how we can better communicate, because there are some people who are realizing that don't read the epistle. And if they don't read the epistle, it's hard to get information. So we're trying to make them brainstorm other ways that we can get information out. We make announcements included in the epistle. We have a bulletin board, but how can we better? Thank you all for participating in the Cottage meetings. Many of you were present. We heard from over half of our congregation. And then we had a really good showing last 2 weeks ago when we had our first Cottage meeting. So thank you for your participation. We have engaged congregation, which is
yeah. I just want to address what could be some misunderstandings about a couple of things that we have heard. And one is flowers. And the only real change to the altar flower fund is that any residual money or profit, if there is any, at the end of any calendar year, will be redesignated to outreach or evangelism. And the message in the epistle states that very clearly now. I did speak with Mary Jean prior to that Vestry meeting to let her know what was being considered. Given the input from parishioners at Cottage meetings, the Vestry's decision to reach out to prior donors in order to give them that same opportunity we're giving to everyone going forward to redirect a portion of the gifts or to decline. So we've done that, and there will be probably almost $4,000 remaining in the altar fund. The other thing that we have heard is about the choir and music. Felicia met with all members of the choir, and the decision was made collectively with declining numbers of choir members, especially at rehearsals. Having a choir director is just not personal, practical. But that was not a budgetary decision. Also, Monty will remain our talented and beloved musician as long as he will have us. A couple of rumblings was that we would lose Monty, and those things are just not true. There is going to be a meeting on August 20th for the sole purpose of gathering ideas about how music will continue as an important ministry at St. Paul's. We heard many creative ideas already, and so come to the meeting with your creative ideas about music. On the 20th, just keep those coming. Another little rumbling, I want to just reassure you that while the Vestry is definitely paying careful attention to the budget, because it's one of our primary roles, and acknowledging that we're still operating with a deficit, there is no anxiety. No anxiety. We will review the second quarter end financial statements along with the second quarter end performance of our 2 investment accounts and meet with our treasurer and the rest of the investment team. I'm looking at you, at our August Vestry meeting. The Episcopal Church Foundation, which holds those endowment accounts, reminded us in a recent webinar that churches are different from other nonprofits and that we should continue our focus on both mission and ministry, which follows God's teaching of abundance rather than scarcity. So I wanted to just say those things, and now I'll turn this.
Can I ask? Sure, because I didn't hear the what's about the choir. So we're not going to have a choir at the end of the summer. I mean, we're on break
during the summer. But what you're talking about is for next year, we're going to do something different for music.
We're, having a meeting on August 20th, and we're inviting people to participate in, what music looks like moving forward. I did let Nick go, and he wrote a wonderful letter to the choir thanking them. He really had a good experience working with the choir. And we have many choir members that are planning to be at that meeting, and we have some musicians who are planning to be at that meeting, figuring out how those of us with musical gifts can offer what we have to our collective music.
To those of us without music.
Okay,
So, yeah.
I just wanted to try to understand.
Thanks.
May I? It is my understanding from Mary Jean that she was not consulted about taking before Vestry chose to do it. I believe that's in direct contradiction to what you just said. Another thing that was not mentioned was that the Sakurada fund was completely apparently put into outreach. Those, I think those are two important additions. One contradiction, one addition.
Mary Jean and I met Friday before the Vestry meeting, and my message may not have been as clear and direct, but the purpose of having coffee, in addition to setting up a meeting with her sister, was to let her know that we were considering using a residual amount out of the flower fund and redirecting it. So it was not, I met with Mary Jean, and it wasn't clear in that meeting. Mary Jean and I had a conversation, telephone call scheduled next week. If it wasn't clear, I apologize to Mary Jean that that was the purpose of my wanting to meet with her, to let her know that the Vestry was going to consider redirecting money out of the flower fund going forward, and offering that opportunity for others if they wanted their gifts.
My understanding was also that the flower fund would be left with $2,000, not $4,000, and half of the fund, so the flower fund, once again, was being reallocated to that.
What we can do and what we offer to do in reaching those people who would donate dedicated flowers through a donation to a designated fund. An ability to say yes, please do that, or no, we decline. Only those funds who said yes, please do that, would we, could we, or would we want to redirect? And that amount is not $2,600. That amount is close to $1,500.
Last time for response, if I can chime in. So some of you guys may know this, some of you guys may not know this. I worked at CU Foundation and UNC Foundation and CSU Foundation in the accounting and finance departments for 7 years before I went out on my own and started my own business. And so I worked with many donated gifts that had restrictions for use. And on occasion, we would have situations where there was a fund where everything had a particular project or something was taken care of and finished, there was residual money left. And so what we did at all three of those university foundations is the same thing that we're doing here, which is you reach back out to the donors that gave it for that initial restriction and ask those donors, can we, are you okay if or would you be willing to redesignate your money to a different source? And then the donor, only the donor of those monies is the one that can say, yes, move it somewhere else, or no, I want to keep it there. The donor is the only one that can make that decision. And we recognize that here. That's the same thing. We just contacted those donors and said, look, we have some money that's been sitting in the flower fund for a while. Are you interested and willing to redesignate donations you have already given to the flower fund to this other purpose? And the majority of people, quantity-wise, did say, yes, let's repurpose.
And those who said no.
And those who said no, their money stayed in the flower
Yeah.
fund. We did not move any of their money. So this is all with donors' permission, because they're the ones that control, they don't control, that's not the right word, designate the money, and they're the only ones that can redesignate that money. And so that's what we've done with that historical flower fund money.
And that amounts to about
$1,500 last time, but I think there's an updated list with new stuff that's come in.
Yeah.
So
Jan,
far out.
Could you talk towards the computer because they're having trouble hearing us?
So it is not, only that amount will be redesignated.
If
And
the donors wanted it.
only that amount of the donors who've approved will be redesignated.
Right.
And so that will be somewhere around $1,500. Flower fund, let's say, was around 5,000 something. So there will be almost $4,000 left from the historical gifts.
And then on the go forward basis, we're gonna change the disclosures in the epistle, on the sign up page for flowers, and in, where's the other place? The epistle, the newsletter, the bulletin that comes in when you come into church, to let people know that when they do give to the flowers going forward, if there's any residual amount after flowers are purchased and on the altar at the end of the year, if there's any surplus that it's going to be used for outreach and or evangelism. And those donors are, by giving to the flower fund for flowers in memory of, are consenting to that change. So they're gonna know on the front end. And if they don't wanna do that on the front end, then they don't have to do that. So that's what's being changed from a go forward place. Everybody, before they donate to give flowers, and they'll know clearly that that's what could happen with any excess money. So they're still making a choice on the front end, and they're fully aware of what will be happening.
2,600 is just an approximation, thinking, well, I wonder if half the people or a fourth of the people. So that was just an estimate. But the vestry said we're going to leave at a minimum that amount. 2,600 out of 5,200. And that was the minimum. What is actually real is approximately $4,000 is the actual.
And the other piece of the question, for the sake of you Zoom folks, was about the Sakurada Fund. Is that going away entirely? Was Gray's question, I believe, or what's happening there?
So the Sakurada Flower Fund was a fund set up by Father Bacon and Soji Sakurada after his wife had died. And it was set up to contribute flowers for the altar quarterly in their memory or family's memory. And that was done 1991. 2001. And because that money was sitting and we hadn't had any donations for the Sakuradas on the altar, I contacted Mary and Kate, who is their daughter, and asked, is there another way you'd like to use these funds? Because they have been growing in the Colorado Episcopal Foundation. And she said, my parents appreciated outreach. They always gave to outreach things during their life. And so outreach would be a wonderful thing. So we haven't actually let the congregation know that we would like to, I've floated the idea with Gray about there being a Sakurada match for the Habitat for Humanity this year. I asked Mary and Kate, their daughter, if that would be an appropriate allocation, and she said absolutely. So we haven't let the congregation know that at this point, if that's what we're considering.
I would have more to say about that, and I'd like to meet this Felicia and Jan at their convenience. As a preview of what it proposed is that, first of all, the vestry did vote earlier this year to commit $3,500 as a habitat match. And it was Mike Werner, who requested that match. I would like to rescind that request because it was my understanding, basically, it was looking for $3,500 that the Vestry said, essentially, where are we going to get it? Oh, we can get it from Sakurada. I would like to rescind our request and take the Vestry off the hook or St. Paul's off the hook for providing a $3,500 habitat match because there is an anonymous donor request offered to make that match just as that anonymous donor did last year when the church was having financial problems. No money was given from the church for that match. That was entirely separate. We're supposed to do the same thing this year, but we would like to see the Sakurada fund restored as it was an endowment set up between Father Bacon and Shogi Sakurada. And we feel the flower fund has been in remiss by not giving the flowers on those dates that Mr. Sakurada had requested, because when Addie Kano passed away, she no longer was reminding Virginia to do it, and we had not, Virginia had not given those, so she very much apologizes and acknowledges it's her fault that these flowers have not been given away or have not been at the altar on days that she'll request. That was her fault. She is very apologetic that she has left generation of flower committee to another person. But in order to get St. Paul's off the hook for that $3,500, we request that you move the money that has been designated as the match back into the Sakurada fund, which is roughly $3,500, and the Sakurada fund remain in perpetuity in honor of Shogi and Phyllis Sakurada. Phyllis was the flower chairman for years. Shogi was a highly decorated veteran, Second World War, combat infantry. He and his comrades were the most highly decorated unit in World War in military history in the United States. And to forget about him, forget about the dates that he requested the flowers, we think is a mistake. Therefore, we make this offer to and request the Vestry that we take that $3,500 off of the books. It wasn't in this to get out now. We send it and put the money back into the stock.
So we can talk about that at the next master meeting. And,
That would be great.
I'll reach out to you about having a meeting.
So did the Zoom folks get that? They will reach out to Gray and have this issue come up at the Vestry meeting, next Vestry meeting.
Any other questions, clarifications, prior or comments?
This is not choir flowers, but it's something I've brought up almost every annual meeting, and I was a little disappointed that there was no mention of it. And because I did mention it at the Cottage meetings, and that's if two people were to show up in wheelchairs for Sunday service, where would we put them? Where could they park their wheelchairs and participate in the service? I know my mother is no longer with us, so this is. But I still feel I need to speak out on behalf of other people that are sensitive. There is no place. In fact, once, we shouldn't have to start moving furniture while the person sits there and waits for a place for their wheelchair to park. We need to decide where could wheelchair, and the slope of the floor is a problem about putting it at the end of the pews. But it's a problem we need to look at, how can we make people comfortable that are differently able to come to our church.
Jim Pasula asks, why are we talking about these subjects? I thought that the purpose of this meeting was to be the, let me put it up here, Jim,
I
sorry.
was just gonna say,
Why are we talking about these subjects? I thought the subject was feedback from the Cottage meetings.
we were talking about, and we hope to address them quickly, obviously that didn't happen, because they're rumblings, and we wanted to clear up some of the rumblings if at all possible. So that was the reason why, but let's move on to the report out for the Cottage meeting.
Before we do, can I just say to you, Nancy, that I would love to participate with you on a team to kind of make recommendations to the vestry about accessibility issues. I think that's really is important, and maybe you and I can put our heads together and make some recommendations for that.
I'm happy to contribute my expertise.
Yes, Jody, that'd be great.
That would be
Okay.
great.
So,
Which is just what the cottage meetings were. We need a little group. When people need something, it's a ministry. Let's do that. Okay.
and that is one of the things that we highlighted these reports. Yours, but that these things that we have identified in the listening sessions that people seem to want, they might be new ministries, and in order to start them, we're going to need a shepherd to shepherd that ministry, or does need to be a point of contact. And so, just something to keep in mind as we hear about some of these report outs. So one of the words used, two of the words that came up the most when we talked about what we heard, what we thought about St. Paul's, asked for one word to describe St. Paul's, the DNA, the word resilient. It came up over and over and over. A lot of transition and change, and the word resiliency keeps coming forward. Clergy changing rapidly to selling the building to many, many other things. So resilient, and also the word love. So one of the actions out of that, what we heard,
Is that we should return to having just a welcoming shepherd and a little welcoming ministry. And having the ushers do that while they are busy is not probably good enough as somebody just specifically, as people come through those double doors, to greet. Kathleen is so good at that and has done that. But anything we do, we really just need one person to see that it gets done. And to get, not to do all the work, but to be in charge of all of that.
so we're looking for someone to oversee a welcoming team. We are a welcoming group of people. There's no doubt about that. But actually starting a welcoming committee where we might have a brunch every quarter to welcome new members, where we might just include the name of a new person that has joined us to make sure they have a name tag, those kinds of things. Have a team of people collected together to do those things. So we'll be looking for a shepherd. What is positive, what came up again and again in our cottage meetings, is the faith partnership. We acknowledge there are several people who joined us because of that relationship that we have with Trinity Lutheran and with their Immaculate Ecumenical Catholic. People seem to be drawn to the fact that we are partnering. In this age of so much division, here is an example of people coming together, and they appreciate that. So the action on this original document was that we had a meeting coming up. It was a week ago last Thursday.
Yes. I'm going backwards a little to what we can do better in terms of communication. We asked our congregation to pray for us. And so, and the prayers were felt. And we will make sure that when we meet with the congregation to report out about that meeting and be very transparent. It was an intense meeting. And Ernesto Medina did just a hero's job in facilitating that meeting. But what we would like to do is wait until summer's over so that all the families are back and we can have as many people as we possibly can in a parish meeting instead of sharing it with half a dozen people in this room, and we'll share it with another half a dozen people. We would like everybody to hear the same thing at the same time. So we will have a meeting end of August, first part of September, parish-wide, to share the results of that meeting. There's work to do. And yes, Jody.
Are there ongoing meetings between now and the time you're talking about reporting out? Are there more meetings scheduled to deal with the topics that you dealt with on the Thursday meeting?
Currently, we don't have any meetings scheduled,
Okay,
but I would be surprised if we had additional meetings scheduled. We just received Pastor Ernesto's report
Yesterday.
yesterday.
okay. I just was wondering if you already had scheduled ongoing meetings to deal with pieces of that meeting to keep the conversation going.
And all of us, every vestry member, every council member of both congregations and the communications people in all three congregations receive that same report. So
Okay.
we need to digest that. We do have a co-op, a meeting of just the senior, junior warden, rector, president, vice president. We have an ongoing co-op meeting, just meeting with business kinds of things. And at that time, we may have all adjusted a little and figure out to have a next meeting. But we do want to share with the congregation what we all learned and what each of our congregations brings to a partnership. I don't know that we understood that we are all different and we all bring a different gift. So it's those things we are really eager to share with everybody when everybody's back from vacation and school started. So that's the partnership part of this.
Another thing that was positive that came up over there again was the education, the adult information opportunities that are made available after church during the calendar school year. And people have appreciated those. And so,
Like, why? The session on Revelation was phenomenal.
or like art
Yes.
that Lori and Holly talked about. And we do hope to do a repeat of how our spiritual life impacts, or how our faith impacts our work, leading up to Labor Day. Again, Lori. So this is another need for Shepherd to oversee adult faith formation. And so if that calls to you, please let us know. Continue to offer educational opportunities.
The dinner with friends, resumption of that, as a shepherd, it's ongoing. That's just an example of a ministry that is active, working, and absolutely wonderful. And what we should do more, just huge majority, I mean, it was far and away the answer that we heard more and more and more, was what we can do more is outreach. And even right here in our neighborhood. And what things already exist. Isaac exists. There's no need to reinvent Isaac. Let's just jump in with both feet into Isaac. And those kinds of things. But again, we heard at the annual meeting, it was a constant theme at the annual meeting. How about outreach? How about outreach? How about outreach? So we will be for Shepherd for that also. And now we're at music. And now we're at music.
Yeah, that was mentioned earlier. So did you want to say something?
No, I was.
So it says on here, such as the response to the child crisis, as a community solution for that is not, and so there is not an immediate solution to childcare. So that is still as critical as what it was last year.
everywhere. And this is a little dependent, a good example of a gift we could bring to the partnership.
Did you guys on Zoom get that? That Lori was saying that the childcare crisis is still as present in Larimer County as it has been. And Jan's response is,
It's the Trinity preschool. So we need,
Isn't Trinity Preschool participating in the state program? To offer 10 hours of preschool for every child. Do you know? And
yes, and they are participating minimally to understand what will work and what will not work. And then they will participate a little more in the academic year 23 or 24, 25. So the 23, 24 academic year, they increase the hours that they will be open 6. So instead of 9 to noon, 3 days a week, they'll be 9 to 2, 3 days a week. And that's the participation.
well, it's only 10 hours. So, I mean, the state program is only 10 hours of preschool
A week,
a week.
so 3 days.
So basically 2 days at the most.
They're increasing from what they had. So they were from 9 to noon, 5 days a week.
Right, but some kids don't go 5 days. Okay, it's fine, we'll just, I think it would be interesting to hear ways that we would participate
There was
within something that's already here.
There was a task force that was formed, and a number of us participated on that task force. We had a guest speaker in Lyle who was just very well aware in his position in Will County in United Way of what can be done and what the crisis is. And that task force met 6 months or 7 months. And the outcome is that they will increase 2 hours a day for 3 days. And this academic.
And what I was referring to is there was a huge community effort put together to run a ballot measure. And in that ballot measure, there would have been funding available for local programs that could be used as a match or to expand existing programs and a variety of other things. And that has been put on hold for at least another year. And so when I first heard from Jan that the church was working on this, I said, oh, there might be some opportunities coming forward in terms of dollars or facility expansion or paying for education and certification of the people who participate. But none of that is going to come this next year.
And we hopefully the task force would reconvene after they found what will and won't work in this academic year. They will want to have another task force because we considered all of that. And so far as created pro forma for 2 classrooms, full days, and what would that cost, what would the revenue be, et cetera. So there is a task force that may reconvene.
That's a Trinity preschool thing, that's not something we're currently involved in. Is that
We
correct?
all 3 congregations were represented in the task force.
But, I mean, right now,
But we
it's a
can't-
Trinity
it's a
preschool
Trinity
thing, so it's not something that that's a St. Paul's thing.
Right.
So far.
And it would be Trinity who would implement those things with our,
So it's part of adult formation. I'm not sure the congregation, all the congregation knows it's crisis in childcare. And we should have a session on it, a session or 2, in case it comes up on the ballot.
Yeah.
Here. What?
an early childhood counselor here and there.
Yeah, we do.
And we have the
They need to be
assistant,
the speakers.
we have the assistant county manager sitting among us right now, so.
But I can help, I can sort of, help. I can help frame the content of the forum. I mean, I would suggest there's an opportunity for education and community leadership in childcare and housing affordability / homelessness. Because neither of those are receiving kind of urgent attention that they need. I'm saying that as a person intimately involved in both of those in one county.
And that's
And pressuring those who are elected officials to actually address these things with resources that are available.
That's a form of outreach, it sounds like. Is that
Yeah.
correct? I mean, it's another form of it, which is, you can see the passion in the room for the outreach, right? There's a really good example of it.
Advocacy.
And I more so speak from the well-care perspective, but
But
elected
it's
officials
still
here in Larimer County could
Yeah.
give these things greater attention.
It's really a statewide concern.
It is.
It's a national concern.
That's
Yeah.
So let's deal with what we can deal with.
Yeah. Small
So
scale.
Lori, we can write you down somebody who can help us have a phone. There's the woman. Lots of knowledge, influence.
Yeah, thanks for pointing it out to me, that outreach. You can just hear, feel the energy rise in this room and talking about the need.
Thank you.
I asked a question about outreach. This being an appropriate time.
Sure.
My question about outreach is that if the church is hurting for financially, as I understood the pastor relation to say at the start of this meeting today.
No, I didn't hear her say that.
Oh, I take it back. So we have enough money for everything. Because what I had thought was the situation was that we have a lot of voices promoting outreach, but we don't have enough money coming in on the plate and pledged
In the general.
income to support a whole lot of outreach that we cannot, I mean, we're asking for outreach, but we're not paying for it. And I guess I come from the point of view, I would like to see the church support those causes which the people themselves support and by which they demonstrate their support by giving their own resources. In other words, if someone comes and says, let's have a drive for whatever, X, Y, Z, say, all right, we will match what you put up. In other words, we ought to have matching funds. Matching what parishioners themselves give, and that I think should extend to all of our outreach. Therefore, if I say, no, there should be more outreach, well, let me pay for something. That's my only suggestion, is that we have matching funds for outreach, matching what people do.
Can I respond?
Yeah, this is your meeting. Yes, please.
So, I'm the, group that volunteers at the food bank. And we volunteer our time, and I think volunteering time and treasure, are important, as I, donate to the food bank directly. I think other people do too, but our time is valuable. It's a good thing to give. And I imagine other people are doing other, all the time put into faith family hospitality. It's a lot of time. That is a value. So it doesn't always have to be connected to the church budget.
But I think it should be documented so that people realize that there's value. And so that people are acknowledged, I guess, for their outreach efforts, and not individually, but to say, we also do this. Other people in this congregation also do this. So that people can say, oh, well, if you do that, maybe I could think about that. Or maybe sometimes people are like, I don't know, I'm a little worried about that. And if they knew, oh, well, and it's brought up, but I think we still have to encourage people, especially people that are newer or don't know all of us as well,
to say, you know, we've got people that are going, so if you're interested, that's an extra people that help shepherd, as the word is being used today, you into that, so that you know what's going on.
And that needs to be organized, that can't just sit in here. It needs to be an organized effort with a shepherd. Janine, thank you for just emphasizing the need for shepherds for.
That's a great point, and you know what it made me think of is, I volunteer some of my time with the Larimer Humane Society. And one of the things that they do and track is the number of volunteer hours
Yes.
that are spent.
Yes.
And maybe we need to start doing that here, but let's track the volunteer hours.
Totally agree.
If you volunteer something, whether you feel like it's, you know, organized through St. Paul's or it's not organized through St. Paul's, because I do some volunteer things, like my Larimer Humane Society stuff, I don't think of as part of St. Paul's, but it's time that I donate and my expertise that I donate to them. And I think maybe there's a way that we can figure out to start tracking some of that, and then if we report out on it in the monthly or weekly, so we could say there's been X number of hours of time that have been donated to these various sources. It does recognize and show that involvement and kind of intangible numbers that are maybe not, we kind of do tend to forget about. So the other good point too, Becky, that's time is very valuable, and I have some time. I don't have all the time in the world. I'm not quite retired yet, like a lot of you guys are able to be retired yet, but
We're reinvented.
reinvent, whatever, the 9 to 5 stuff. But I think finding a way to track that, I think would be great.
Well, I also think to validate, like, this last weekend, the Eleanor and Karen's girls both volunteered at the Habitat lemonade stand.
Oh, right.
And, you know, that's why it was in the epistle, but still, to recognize their work and to help encourage them to understand that this is good and it's valuable.
Yeah, it makes me think of the need for a shepherd for outreach, who can kind of collectively gather all of this work that the congregation is doing. And someone who had been there yesterday and snapped a picture of Winona and Diana serving.
We got that.
You got the picture?
Yeah.
Excellent.
The Werners got
Thank you.
pictures.
Yeah, yeah.
But then, to whom do you send that?
To me.
Good, yeah.
I can set up a spreadsheet where people online, and tell me if this is a useful way to do this or not for everybody else. I could set up a Google sheet that has information to start tracking hours that people have, and then have a link and remind people to go there. Granted, it is all electronic, so I don't know if that's other people, okay, can put things on it. So
Well, I think about like Becky coordinates the food bank ministry, and so you have a very good idea of how many volunteers show up once a month.
Yeah.
To go, and so it could, because she's a shepherd of that particular ministry, could let us know how many hours St. Paul's folks have given over the last month. And then communicate that to the congregation to let us all know how we're collectively contributing financially. Should we have a match to Habitat, or maybe to the food bank? I know Becky's mentioned another possible match in September, maybe highlight the food bank. But we honor where people are already giving their time, their treasure, and we offer maybe to match what is given with checks for the St. Paul's and that. But I do think we should do a better job of communicating what our congregation is already
But one place we could begin is at pledge time, when we all get a request for a pledge. So ask you to visit your time. So in our pledges, first treasure is time.
Yeah.
I fully agree.
And I think that's on, it's been on the pledge form, and is that said, how will you donate your time? And it has like spaces for that, I think.
But we haven't reported out on
Yeah,
Oh, I see.
we haven't
that. Correct.
collected that.
And reported out.
Well, and to speak to Amy's piece, I always associate that with St. Paul's. So, you know, my mushroom industry, I'm there, but I don't say that I it's there.
Oh, that's a good point.
But you do.
Which I do, yeah.
I also think that gives people who are more homebound an opportunity to know what other people are doing in their name. And if they have an extra dollar that they're putting in for a food bank, then they know that somebody's feet are helping carry that out.
Your administrators are raising their eyebrows at each other.
Can we hear what
I just saw you, Jan, take notes from Ray's suggestions in terms of having money match for outreach. And I'm just struck by the fact that not everyone has money, that they might be called to the ministry. So I would hate to see that be a requirement in order to start a new outreach or a new ministry, that somebody has to bring a match to the table. I just don't feel like everybody's able to do that.
And I think Ray's suggestion was that St. Paul's offered a match.
Yes, that means I would need, so say I'm interested in the community justice one after the tours at Cottage. So at least what I heard Ray say is before that starts, then I should bring a match to the table. And then the church will match my gift, and then we'll start the ministry. And while I might be able to do that, it would make me nervous, and I don't know everybody's financial needs here, but I assume they're not as good as mine. And they might not have that money to bring to the table, and yet our congregation might be called to serve in some way for that ministry. So I would just hope that that's one way somebody could get something going, and not the only way to get something going.
Okay.
I would suggest that housing and homelessness and childcare are the great issues of this decade. And like Jan said, it's not just in Laramie County, it's not just in northern Colorado, it's not just in Colorado, it's in the whole United States. And those are causes that need advocates. And I mean, my understanding of this congregation is it connected to one of its organizing kind of things, organized around a cause. And I would say, many religious communities organized around civil rights, in the 60s, 50s, and 60s. And I think these are the two causes for this decade, because and they're connected. If people can't afford housing and their parents have children that they need childcare for, they're less likely going to be able to afford childcare. If they can't afford childcare, they're less likely going to be able to afford housing. And we are in I was just reading, if you get the Post, you know what a newspaper is? If you get the Post, there's an article, it's actually really true, it's from the Post. Article yesterday, Denver Metro is one of the 10 most expensive cities in the nation for housing. And because of that expensiveness, it's 2.5 times more likely people are going to experience homelessness because of the expensiveness of the housing. And you compare that to a place like Charlotte, North Carolina, or other less expensive housing markets. There's a close connection between the cost of housing and homelessness. So, I mean, that's what I would suggest is, yes, think about things we can do and things we can pay for, but even more so, think about how can we as a group of caring people be committed to a cause and then help the larger community organize towards that cause. And it's not always going to have a concrete thing. Like the last congregation, Felicia, St. Bridget's in Frederick, they had a concrete thing. They had land and they proposed a 50-unit affordable housing development. And actually that just got approved for tax credits. So it's actually a cause, connected to a piece of property. And that's great. But the greater cause is, affordable housing and childcare. And could this community be a community voice for those two things? Because those things aren't going to get solved by, project by project. It's going to be a great shift in the attitude of voters and of community members that are going to address those two particular challenges.
You can kind of sense how important outreach is in our congregation. Okay.
No, thanks.
Okay. Any more on outreach? And Amen.
And I'm saying we're all doing it, and it's
Yeah.
great. And how can we, be a voice in the community for these, they're beyond needs, it's crisis.
So we have already touched on this topic of music. Before. It did come up again and again in our cottage meetings. People's desire to have a music program, their appreciation of the music program. And out of that, we wanted to have another meeting anyway before the decision was made about the choir to figure out, kind of dig down deeper and understanding what that meant for people. And I think that this meeting on the 20th is really a good opportunity to ask those questions. Well, what kind of music do you want? What could you offer? What might we do a little differently now that we don't have a paid choir director? So we hope to gather more information about meetings. So if you have an interest in music, a commitment to it, invite you to show up. On the 20th, we'll be right here after church. And then what we could do better. We mentioned this as well. It was said again and again, communication and transparency. So some of the actions that we've taken are to include the minutes in the epistle from the Vestry meetings, as well as a financial report. Okay, so people can have a better idea of where we are financially. And then at the last cottage meeting report out, it was requested that we also publish the agenda for the upcoming Vestry meeting in case there was something on the agenda that people in the congregation had an interest in, they could talk to a Vestry member about their opinions, their desires, and also know that any of you, it's an open meeting, you can sit in on our Vestry meetings if you like. Right now, we're all held on Zoom, so it's a lot easier to participate, hear what's going on. But greater transparency and communication was what was asked for. Accessibility was mentioned as well. The slope of the floor, and then thank you for reminding us about a place where people come to worship. And the chairs would have a place where people could sit and not have to move them, so that we can maybe reserve an area. This is a place for wheelchairs. Sorry.
Doors. Do you pour water?
I don't know. So that was an idea I proposed to Trinity as a possible capital project. As you heard, we're in negotiations right now with Trinity, trying to discern about lease, long-term leases, and things like that. So we wouldn't want to invest in so we enter into something like that. But it's certainly addressing this.
Yeah, and we have a co-op meeting, and I just bring that up again. Anything else?
I just have a comment about communications and transparency, which came up a lot when Mike and I were on the Vestry. And I think it's a responsibility for all of the congregations to take on. Things are communicated out, I think, and ignored. 50% participation in the cottage meetings, there's tons of them, which is really not that great. And that was, that's the congregations, that's not the people, it's not the leadership. They're organized plenty of people not participating. So I have to say this in a larger meeting space, but if you want to know what's going on, then you need to read the newsletter and you need to show up at meetings. And not just complain about what you hear afterwards.
Amen.
And not just believe the piece that you wrote, the little tiny piece without knowing the facts.
Right.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
Thanks. Yeah. And if there are other ways you can communicate better, I thought the idea of publishing the agenda at that time was a great.
going to implement that. That, there's a lot of, the congregation becoming involved. It doesn't have to be a big thing. I believe all of the Vestry members are open to a one-on-one conversation. If you have a concern or a question or anything going forward, please, feel free to reach out to a Vestry member.
We used to have different tags or name tags or something denoting when people were Vestry members.
Yes, we had ribbons.
Ribbons. I think we've lost that. So on the name tags, that could be something that's encouraged by Vestry members. If there's
It
somewhere,
really is helpful because then people know.
yeah, put in there, like, and if it's a ribbon or something easy, then that on the side, then that just be moved to the name tags as we change Vestry members every year. That helps remind us who it is that's on Vestry at any given time.
Yes.
And I
You
think
can
I
give
did
us
help.
halos.
Yeah.
Thank you, Courtney. Tiara. I don't think Tim Johnson's head would support Tiara. I certainly would have halo.
But that's a good idea.
I think that
And
might,
then reminders that we're here.
yeah.
The other thing, we've come from other congregations and highlighting different ministries has come up. In my previous congregation, each ministry was highlighted at the coffee hour. So this would be the coffee hour where FFH is highlighted, and everybody would say, ask me about FFH, who's involved in FFH.
And we had
and all
ministry
the-
fairs.
Yeah, ministry fairs.
Oh, yeah, once a year.
That's when everybody's there, but
I think the ministry fair I found as positive because I could change horses, so to speak. I could say, okay, I'm really tired of doing this. I'm gonna do something else for a while, and you could sign up and somebody else could volunteer to do something that I haven't.
after talking with you.
Right.
And just being able to.
But I do want to acknowledge that Rhoda and Betsy Perna and I think someone else participated in the bulletin board. Some people actually looked to the bulletin boards and they featured a different ministry every month. And they have on that table right in front of the bulletin board cards and information about all the different ministries.
So that's a good year-round thing. When she's talking about the ministry fair, we had something where one Sunday does, I think it was usually in the fall, my first 2 weeks of planning now, but where all of the ministry heads, like everybody sort of had a table. It's like you go to a conference, right? There's a bunch of vendors at tables. Each ministry kind of had a table with explanation of what they did and somebody there to talk about it. And then it's sort of a more focused effort once a year as opposed to kind of the passive effort that we have year round to help bring education and asking questions, figuring out what it is to work and asking people more directly. Because we all do know also that I think people are more likely to say yes to help with something if they get asked directly instead of it.
Yes.
So,
And just wait,
Go ahead.
I was just gonna ask Jim or Judy, Carol, I'm sorry, didn't or Carol, for any questions or responses or suggestions.
And you can go ahead and unmute and speak to the room if you like.
Nothing from this end. I'm here to listen.
Jim. And just a reminder, we would love to have shepherds for the welcoming team, for the outreach team, and the last one. No, education. Education. Those are 3 areas we're really looking for shepherds to someone to oversee. Thank you.
And stay tuned for the big meeting to report out on our 301 retreat.
20th of August is a set meeting already.
That's right.
That's the music meeting.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. We'll see you next Sunday.
There is a small people.